Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 28, and I thought we would talk about truth and subjectivity. It's something that we talked about in the earlier episodes, but I think that in the podcasting world, people generally don't go back to earlier episodes unless they really had to. And in most situations, people really don't. You can kind of pick up and sort of catch up sort of by inference. But I do want to kind of go over it a little bit more because I've heard a couple of people use the word truth in an absolute kind of way. That is, here's the truth, you can't deny it. Let's remind everyone what the truth is, not in those words, but that kind of attitude. In fact, I was listening to an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president here in the United States against Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And he is really bright. I gotta say, he is 10 times smarter than I will ever be. And I think his advantage is that he has either near photographic memory or he actually does, or his brain just is that good. But in any case, his whole platform is just one word: truth. That's it. And so I thought that it's kind of interesting because it brings in this absolute understanding of truth back into the picture. And if you go in the first or two episodes, I talk about this idea of people weaponizing information and trying to use these weaponized bits of information to silence their opponents. I don't think that's what this guy is going to do. It doesn't sound like it. Nevertheless, I thought we'd go over it once again in the context of subjectivity and postmodernism in general, as a matter of fact. We're not going to talk about postmodernism directly, but it does have bearing on that, since I am using a postmodernist approach, methodology. So then where's the truth come in? Where does the orientation that one needs to make decisions in life, where does it come from? Well, most people want to engage in a discussion or an argument from their own personal truth. So really, it's their opinion, which they believe is true, and they often will strongly desire that other people recognize their opinions as being truth. But we've been advocating subjectivity throughout all of these episodes. And so if you take subjectivity into consideration, which is also undeniable, some people might even call it a truth, right? Which is kind of interesting, right? So what do you do in the context of the reality of subjectivity? Well, most people want other people to agree with them so then they can proceed with their choices. But we have to always remember that there are consequences for all choices, no matter what. Even if I believe something is true, there are consequences. And I mentioned this in passing before, but I believe that some people engage in the whole virtue signaling endeavor because they say that no cost is too high. It's that attitude, right? It's like, if we can just save one life, then everything would have been worth it, right? Even if we kill 1 billion people, if we save one, then fine. But that's a very strange way of discussing what might be best for each individual. So here, if we shift gears a little bit, in science, there's something called the unified theory. And the unified theory is this, well, I guess for some scientists, a goal, a theory that unifies the theories that explain the big stuff in the universe and the theories that cover all of the small stuff, the super, super small stuff, right? And so the general theory of relativity are all the formulas and theories that govern the movement of planets, of bodies, of atoms, and things like that, the big things of the universe. But then the quantum mechanics of the universe, and this is on the assumption that even these two theories are even a little bit true. But quantum mechanics studies the all of the things that cannot be observed. They were so small that they don't have mass. And if you know anything about the general theory of relativity, all of the formulas there deal with mass, right? Not weight, right? But mass. And in the quantum level, there is no mass. And so everything becomes very, very strange. None of the formulas that you generated for the theory of relativity works on the quantum level. And so someone says, one day we're going to have a unified theory that explains everything. And you might get a kick out of this. Some people will call it the God theory, right? Some of you might have heard of the God particle, but this is the God theory, because if we did have this theory, it'd be like God, right? It explains everything. So that's one way of looking at it. But you have, in the meantime, we have this huge thing, the universe, and any of us can only see little bits of it at a time. In other words, we have a small perspective on something that is infinite, right? And any little bit of the infinite that you may observe is negligible, right? But nevertheless, we strive for our own little piece of the universe. But every interpretation then is going to be subjective. There are some people who say, we know 90% of what there needs to be, of what needs to be known in the universe, which is a very silly statement, because to say 90% assumes that you know what the 100% is, and no one knows that, right? So how much there is to know, how much do we know in comparison to how much there is to know? No one really knows. Okay. So a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, because people who begin to learn, they think they know everything, and then they start forcing other people to live in the way with their subjectivity, and that never works. So a lot of people want to state that the truth, whatever it is absolute, and so everyone has to agree. But, we've been talking about subjectivity, and no matter what idea you come up with as being the truth, you may get a lot of people to agree, but there will always be a minority of people who will disagree. Whether they're right or wrong, I think it's besides the point. To them, whoever it is, they believe that the truth is somewhere else. And so what I always say, well, anyone can believe whatever it is they want. However, they have to take responsibility for those beliefs. They have to pay for the choices that they want to make. They have to pay for the beliefs that they want to have, right? So there is a cost in belief, in choices. Some people might call it responsibility. Some people might call it consequences. It doesn't matter, right? But there are costs in the things that we choose to believe. In fact, even if we were to find a truth, it doesn't mean everything is free now, but based on the understanding of the truth, we now have to make choices, and those choices have cost, even if it is only opportunity cost. That is, because we believe this, we're always going to choose this, A as opposed to B. Right? So we'll never choose B because of what we believe is true. We're always going to pick A. Well, not picking B is part of what is understood to be opportunity cost, right? So there's a cost. There's many different ways to assess cost, time, not just expense, but also time, right? Now, here's the thing, though. Costs are generally erased and hidden when government enters the picture. It's not that they're forever erased. No, it's only temporarily. And when you have obscured costs, people make bad decisions, or probably the decision that they wouldn't have made. That's what I mean by bad. If they knew what the true cost was, they probably would have made different choices. But for the longer that the government is going to obscure the cost, the bigger the problem eventually becomes when people discover what the actual cost is. For example, the deficit, the debt of the US government, the longer we wait, the bigger it's going to get, and therefore the more pain that there will be experienced by everyone who is tied to the dollar, and that is pretty much nearly everyone except for perhaps the BRICS countries, right? And especially Russia, they were cut off from the dollar a couple of years ago. And so only certain people will be unaffected, but even Russia would be, right? Because they do trade with other countries. And if other countries' economies tank, then who's going to buy their stuff, right? And so everyone is going to be affected once the dollar starts to show all of its cards, right? All of its problems. So when government enters the picture, costs are distorted, choices that people wouldn't have made are being made. Now, if we actually had to pay for our beliefs, many of the ideas, many of the choices that people are making today would not be discussed, right? Certain choices would not be made. In other words, there are a lot of ideas that are floating around in the news, out of people's mouths, that in an honest economy with honest money, they would never have a chance, right? They would be so expensive that only few people would ever talk about it. And hey, it's okay. We'll let them have it, let them discuss whatever it is, because the rest of us can go on living in the way that we want, right? And so the more expensive a choice is or belief is, the fewer people are going to believe in it. So the fact that certain ideas are very, very popular, it's only because of government subsidy, government coming into our lives and changing the cost. So a subsidy can be anything. It can be welfare, but any money from the government, and some people might call it a paycheck, nevertheless, money from the government is always going to be a kind of subsidy. And so once government enters the picture, everything gets distorted. And now we're having more people make choices that they otherwise would not have made. Keep in mind that in the context of the podcast, we're talking about moving forward, right? Having life continually improve, even if you are getting older in life. The point and the goal is to continue to move forward, to add value, to create value. And a key component, a necessary component in order to have that, is that prices must show themselves. We have to know what the prices are. And I know some of you might be saying, but prices are subjective too. Yeah, but relative prices will largely remain the same. And so even though our subjective understanding of what is valuable and what is not, right, is different, the prices are generally going to be the same relative to other things, right? And so certain ideas are always going to be more expensive than other ideas. And most people will gravitate towards more cost-effective choices, just simply because you can do more when you're able to economize that way. I do want to say, I have my own truths, and some of you, and eventually it will come out, I guess, but I have my own truths, and I believe that they are absolute. However, I realize that I can't impose them on anybody, including my own family, right? I can't just by edict say, from now on, this is how we're going to do things. I have to persuade them. I have to convince them that certain ideas are better than others. And if I just resort to a kind of a dictatorship and say, this is the way it's going to be from now on, there's a cost to that. And I mentioned this before, maybe my kids will talk smack about me to all their friends and say how they can't wait to move out of the house, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's always a cost to anything that one does, because life is dynamic, life is constantly changing. And at the very least, all of us are getting older, which means that we won't be as independent. If we make it that far, we won't be as independent as we used to be when we were younger. So we need to have a basic respect for each other through property rights, right? So this is my body, this is my stuff, this is my labor, this is the stuff that I've produced with my labor. These ideas are very important, and it's the starting point for understanding what we can do to other people. So in other words, all of us have an absolute belief. If you thought about it and you're old enough, right? There are certain things that you believe are absolutely true. But then what, right? What do you do? Do you force everyone else to agree with you, even if it doesn't matter to them? No, you don't want that, right? All you care about is, are you allowed to continue to believe what you want to believe, right? This is why freedom of speech is so important, right? The ability to be able to exchange ideas. The opposite of freedom of speech is legislation of subjectivity, right? Legislation of morality, right? Fewer laws and more freedom of speech is what we want. That should be sacred. Should be, right? I said it, right? Otherwise, I'm invoking an absolute truth. But if you think about it, the more freedom that we have to exchange ideas, the more we can expose whether ideas are actually good or whether ideas are perhaps not so good. Like yelling fire in a crowded theater. I think you should be able to do that. Especially today, it's really easy. It would be easy enough to figure out who it was and then all the liability, any kind of injury, any kind of expenses that come as a result of yelling fire in a crowded theater would be the responsibility of the person who said it. And once you do that math, then you're like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. It's too expensive. So all belief has risk. One way, if especially if society is moving very quickly, or there's a lot of people are susceptible. There's the lawsuit phenomena, and if you've been keeping track of the news, there are certain ideas that are being sued right now, and I hope that they win, because it was a very, very, what I would say, abuse of the legislation of morality. A lot of people were basically taken advantage of, and they made choices which they cannot roll back, right? These are not choices that could easily be undone. So everyone has to basically hedge. Even I hedge, right? In the sense that I have to take into consideration I might be wrong. So I do have absolute beliefs, as I said before. I won't go into it now because I'm still in a legal situation with my school, so I'd rather not say too much. But in any case, I have certain absolute beliefs, but I do allow for better interpretation, better explanations of what I believe is true, right? And so that hedging, or taking into account that there might be something better or you got something wrong, is an acknowledgement of the box. It is an acknowledgement that we can't see beyond the limits of our knowledge and information. So let's see. So all of us can have beliefs. It's perfectly fine as long as you don't coerce others. I don't even coerce my kids, right? Only when I think something is extremely dangerous will I actually, say anything. But for now, what I do is I lay out all of their choices and what the possible consequences are of those choices. And hopefully one day they will understand exactly what I meant, and sort of they won't make as many mistakes as I did when I was younger. What I love seeing, however, is after I lay out how I see things, they suggest an even better choice. That is the most fantastic thing. I don't know if you've ever seen it. That is the most rewarding, fantastic feeling and phenomena that you can observe, is that some people see more than you, even if they are your own children. So we can have our truth, we can protect that truth, but listen to other people, see what other people have to say, continue to exchange ideas. So a free society always allows everyone to exchange ideas. The best ideas always rise to the top, just like the truth, whatever that is, always reveals itself. This is the way that we can have peace and stability in a diverse society and in an increasingly small world. So that's it for today. I will see you next time.